Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking again at the contents of the small display cabinet I have, and at the moment I have it filled with some Australian small kit from the Vietnam era in general. The stove that's in there is post-war, for example. There are some little bits in there which aren't strictly Vietnam dated, but it's representative of some small kit from the Vietnam War. There's also a Soldiers Handbook and so on in there, so I'll stop talking about the bits and pieces now and we can actually get on to have a look at them.
Okay, here we have the cabinet display, and we'll work front to back, left to right again, I guess. At the front here, on the left-hand side, we have a bottle of insect repellent. This is, there are two, in fact, in the cabinet. As you can see, there's a green bottle on the right-hand side, which we'll get to in a minute. The grey bottle here is intended for use, I believe, on your clothing. It deals with things like mites and so forth that live in your clothing. So it's designed to be applied directly to the cloth, particularly along seams and things, to repel insects there. This is not a Vietnam dated bottle. I believe it's dated 94, but it's essentially the same. Behind that we have a set of cutlery, as you can see here, a clipped together set of cutlery. Very similar in design to that introduced with the late war jungle equipment, the British late war jungle equipment. In basically the same design, and I believe that set is dated 1966 or 67. I think the pieces have 66 through 67 dates on them. Underneath that we have an Australian mess tin, similar in design to the British in being an oblong mess tin, but somewhat shallower. Obviously this saves weight, there's less aluminium in it, and as you can see it has folding butterfly handles. There's a handle on each side that fold out and round, rather than the handle that folds out from the top on the British mess tins, the single handle that folds out upwards. Underneath this we have a post-war Australian Hexie stove. I believe the Vietnam War era examples are gold tone rather than silver tone, so that is definitely a post-war item, but it is an Australian made example with Australian Hexie tablets in. I don't know if I'll ever be able to pick up a genuine Vietnam era example, but who knows. So that's just there as a placeholder at the moment, really. And then at the back here, in the middle, we have the Soldiers Handbook, and this is from 1963. If you can find a copy of this, obviously I'd highly recommend it. It's got a huge amount of reference material in it regarding drill, putting up hoochies and field defences, basic field defences and so forth. It's an excellent sort of summary of the Australian Army in the 1960s, I guess you could say. It summarises a lot of the tactics and doctrine and so forth, so worth picking up if you can find a copy. Moving back to the front here, we have a foot powder tin. This is a Vietnam War example. It's a 1971 dated, so we have that there. Obviously foot powder, very important. If your feet get damp, as they were very likely to in Vietnam, drying them and powdering them is a very good way of preventing or minimising foot rot, which can be a major problem, or trench foot as it's colloquially known. At the back here, in the middle rather, we have a shell dressing. This is a Second World War dated shell dressing, very commonly seen carried in Vietnam. Taped to web equipment and weapons, often taped to the stocks of rifles and things. I've seen quite a few photographs of that being done. Not uncommon in the British Army at the time as well, in Northern Ireland. Quite common to see shell dressings taped onto belts and so forth. Behind that we have two different airmail envelopes, and you can actually see here the outline of Vietnam, and these are specifically intended for Australian forces in Vietnam to use. Moving to the front again, here we have a sterilising outfit, and this contains two sets of tablets, again the sterilising tablets, and I believe a set of tablets again to try and take the taste away of the actual sterilising agent. You can see it's an oblong tin in contrast to British tins, which are square, but this is, as I say, the Vietnam, the ones that have been carried in Vietnam, the sterilising outfits, the two tubes with sort of plastic stoppers and a bit of foam in there to stop them rattling around. We'll move back along the right hand side now. We have another foot powder tin here. This example is dated 1967. Slightly different way of opening at the top, and obviously gold lacquered rather than green, but the content's essentially the same. And then behind that we have the second insect repellent bottle, the green example. That's dated 1988, so again that is a post-war example, but it is essentially the same as that used during the Vietnam War era. And it contains insect repellent designed to be used on your skin, so it's designed to be used on the body essentially, to minimise the risk of insect bites, mosquitoes, that sort of thing. Although obviously it's not a sure preventative, it will merely repel them. It's not going to necessarily save you from getting bitten, unfortunately, but better than nothing. And then behind that we have an Australian Army field message book. Now, this again is a post-war example, post-Vietnam War example. I believe the entries in it are dated 1980s, but it is essentially the same again as those carried. So a nice thing to have. And as I say, not all items here would be carried by everybody. Obviously, the Soldier's Handbook isn't necessarily going to be going into the field with you, but it's a nice thing to have at the back there. It just gives a bit of depth to the display. So yes, I say we'll have a look at some of these items in more detail in the future, probably, most likely, those bits which I have sort of bits and pieces to talk about, like the Mestin design and so forth. But that's it for now. That's the contents of the cabinet as I have them at the moment.
So there we have just a brief run through of the bits and pieces I have in the cabinet at the moment. As I say, some Australian small kit there, the handbook, the Soldiers Handbook and Field Meshes book and so forth. So just nice to bring those little bits and pieces together in one little display. As I say, it's just nice to keep changing the bits and pieces that are in there to give a bit of variety. As I say, if you enjoy this sort of content, if you enjoy this sort of video and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you are subscribing, or whether if you've already subscribed, do make sure you hit the little notification button, the little bell down below next to the subscribe button, which will alert you when I upload future videos. There's also a Facebook and Instagram page, which I always promote at the end of my videos. I post photographs of the collection there as well. There's also I also post photographs of reenacting events there and let people know when those are going on and where I'm going to be. So possibly a good place to follow me as well if you'd be interested to see that sort of thing. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So until next time, bye for now.